Since some of us are new, could you give us a 2-minute spiel about yourself?
About myself? Oh, did I not do that?
I remember you said you have your license in the state, but.
Yeah, so I've been investing since I got my first property when I was 20. And at the time, I wasn't thinking about investing at all. I was thinking about moving out of my parents' house. And I was thinking about the fact that I just, for whatever reason, never wanted to rent anything, right? So I'm living in my parents' house. At the time, my father has a construction company. So right out of high school, I'm going to college, and I'm also working with him, managing his construction business. So I grew up around entrepreneurship all my life. I always had some type of construction influence. So I found this house that I wanted to buy to live in. I put it under contract, and it needed repairs. Well, that was cool with me because, you know, my dad was a contractor, or is a contractor, so no problem. So put it under contract, I go to a lender, they send the appraiser out, the appraiser comes in and says, this house is in too much disrepair for you to get a loan on it, it's not gonna work. I was doing traditional lending. I didn't know anything about hard money lending at the time. So they send this traditional appraiser out, he says it's not gonna work. My mortgage lender calls me back and says, you need to find another property. But I really liked this property, right? I was buying it for $78,000. I thought it's probably worth 100, 110, it's cool. So I went back to the seller and I said to the seller, will you give me 6 months to renovate it? And after I renovate it, then I can qualify for the loan. At the time, I had no idea that what I was negotiating was a lease purchase. He agreed to it. I renovated the house. 6 months later, I went back, I got the loan for $78,000. I'm living in the house about 1.5 years, and I'm watching TV, and I find Oprah interviewing Robert Kiyosaki, who had just written Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I go out, I buy the book, I read it from cover to cover in a couple of days, which is amazing for me, because I'm known to buy books, but I don't read them. So I read it from cover to cover in a couple of days, and I thought, man, I think I can do this. 2 or 3 weeks passed. So this is how God always works in my favor. He always lines stuff up. When you put yourself in situations just like this to get information, it's amazing what happens when you leave here because of what you heard today. About 3 weeks later, I'm in, I think it was Kroger. I was in the grocery store. I run into this guy named Chris Jaswa, who is an investor who's also a real estate agent and a property manager. And I say, hey, you know, I just read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I just bought a house 1.5 years ago. He says to me, he says, Kito, I can help you with this. If you want to buy a new house, I will find you a tenant and manage your current property for you free if you let me represent you when you buy your next house. And I said, okay, why not? So I go out, I buy a new house, that becomes a rental property for me. Now I'm reading up more, I'm learning more about investing. I move into my new house, and then I hear that if you own a property for 2 years and you live in it for 2 years, you can move out of it and sell it within 3, and you can take all the profit capital gains free. Now I know there's some little, intricacies in there, Josh. Well, flow with me.
No. I'm not a tax attorney. You're good.
So if you live in a house for 2 or 5 years, then you can take the profit. So I'm like, okay, so I got this house that now I've been moved out of a couple years. Maybe now I'll sell it. So that, long story short, that put me on a path to every 2 years I was moving. And every 2 years I was selling what I had just rented for 2 years. So I was taking this cash, tax-free, and I began to invest it and reinvest it. So fast forward to right before the crash in 2008, I had eventually gotten a real estate license. I was helping so many people do what I do. I've always had a passion for education and teaching people. So people would come to me and say, how are you doing this? Family and friends, I would help them do it. And at the time, not so much now, but at the time, all the deals that I was helping people renovate, etc., were deals that came from the MLS. So I was referring them to other agents who were selling them the house, and another agent was making the commission. So I said, you know what, I need to get a license. So then I got my license, and fast forward to 08, at that point I had 17 properties and was pretty much doing this full time. And then the crash came. And when the crash came, I went from 17 properties to 2 properties. Some the bank took back. Some I called the bank and said, please come get it. You know, some I happened to sell. I had rented them to lease purchase occupants, so I sold them just in time. So, you know, I went from 17 to 2, and then I took a break for a few years. And then after taking a break for a few years, a guy named Mark Spain called me. And Mark Spain said, I'm working with this new hedge fund. They are acquiring property for their portfolio called Invitation Homes. And I want to know if you will come join my team. And I had, during my break, I went back to Kennesaw State to finish the degree that I'd never finished. And I was a full-time college student. I wasn't really thinking about real estate. And I said, Mark, you know, I'm in school. You know, I can help you out, but only part-time. He said, no, I need you to work full-time. I said, well, I got about 7 months left in school. He said, okay, well, I'll call you back. Mark called me every month for about 4 months. January of the next year, he calls and he says, are you still in school? And I said, yes, I'm still in school. He said, when you graduate? I said, April, the end of April. He says, if you promise me that when you graduate, you will come into my office and start working full-time, I'll let you start now working from home. And I said, okay. So I did that. In April, I graduated. I started working for him full-time in May. From May that year to May the next year, I sold him 98 houses. It was about $14 million worth of real estate. And a good 15 of those I probably did with Brad. And so a year later, the Invitation Homes stopped buying as much as they were. Our team was selling them 120, 130 houses a month. There was a team of like 24 of us on the acquisitions team. And as they stopped buying or started slowing in their buying process, it went from 24 acquisitions people down to I was the 6th man standing. As the 6th man standing, Mark said, you know, I'm wrapping up this investor team, but I want to keep you on board. You can decide, do you want to be a listing agent or do you want to be a buyer's agent? And I said, I don't want to be either one. I didn't get involved to work with buyers and sellers traditionally. I'm an investor. So I left his team. Buy and Sell Inc. became a full service brokerage. And that's when we started doing what I was doing for Mark. So they're hedge funds that we work with. And our whole purpose and passion is building and creating generational wealth and teaching people how to do it on a grassroots level and giving you the necessary tools to be successful. So that's a little bit about me. The last thing I'll say in closing, again, thank you for being here.